What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so now we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 20. Past few chapters have been a lot more about things for the people to do once they settle in the Promised Land. So, bit more of an expansion on things, more so than just, restating previous commands. Some of them, yes, might have been stated before, but it's also, more specifically saying, hey, when you settle in here, do this thing. That, yeah. Then things will be better off for you amongst each other, and, the general group's relationship with God will also be better for it. So, given this subheading here, this doesn't seem like it's probably going to be a whole lot that was mentioned in previous chapters, but I'm not going to say outright that it won't be. Especially if it gets into stuff with, outright destroying all the stuff of the peoples that they take over. But anyway, let me just dive into the chapter here and let the verses kind of speak more so for themselves. So here we go. Deuteronomy chapter 20. When you go out to fight your enemies, and you face horses and chariots, and an army greater than your own, do not be afraid. The Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, is with you. When you prepare for battle, the priest must come forward to speak to the troops. He will say to them, "Listen to me, all you men of Israel. Do not be afraid as you go out to fight your enemies today. Do not lose heart or panic or tremble before them. For the Lord your God is going with you. He will fight for you against your enemies, and he will give you victory." Okay. So, we've had some statements previously to not be afraid of their enemies that they're going to fight in the Promised Land. But this now specifically mentions, it says the priest. I assume the high priest in this case, because, there's generally more than one priest in total, but high priest would make the most sense. Which, was Aaron before. So my understanding in the context of this chapter would probably be his son Eleazar. But it's details. Not that important. But anyway, presumably the high priest is also supposed to encourage the troops before they go into the battle to not be afraid, because God will be with them. So long as they're actually continuing to follow God. So then, verse 5. Then the officers of the army must address the troops and say, "Has anyone here just built a new house, but not yet dedicated it? If so, you may go home. You might be killed in the battle, and someone else would dedicate your house. Has anyone here just planted a vineyard, and not yet eaten any of its fruit? If so, you may go home. You might die in battle, and someone else would eat the first fruit. Has anyone here just become engaged to a woman, but not yet married her? Well, you may go home and get married. You might die in the battle, and someone else would marry her." Then the officers will also say, "Is anyone here afraid or worried? If you are, you may go home before you frighten anyone else." When the officers have finished speaking to their troops, they will appoint the unit commanders. Okay. So, some reasons given to not have to fight. Engaged to be married, but not actually married yet. Sounds fair enough. The whole planting a vineyard and not eating its fruit, the first fruits were very important, at least in this particular context. Really, for the most part, those kinds of things were supposed to be designated, offered, whatever. Designated to be offered to God. But generally, with the offerings, there were portions of those that would be eaten by the person giving the offering. In any case, though, like, it doesn't seem right to have someone do the work in setting something up, whether it be vineyard or house or whatever, and not get to reap any of the benefit of that. So I think in order to prevent those circumstances, that's part of the reason those are given as exceptions for, warriors going to battle. And also, understandably, you don't want anybody who's really scared and doesn't want to be there because they're scared, because their fear might add fear to other people and just compound the problem. So, yeah. Basically, they wanted none of the fighting troops to have any excuses not to be there. And they wanted... Basically, they wanted all the troops fighting to be all in, on this battle. Like, mentally, physically ready for it. Because they might die in the battle. And you don't want them, having any regrets about that. I'm possibly going a little bit beyond what's stated here, but that still seems kind of like the overall broader intent with it. Anyway, okay. Moving on to verse 10. As you approach a town to attack it, you must first offer its people terms for peace. If they accept your terms and open the gates to you, then all the people inside will serve you in forced labor. But if they refuse to make peace and prepare to fight, you must attack the town. When the Lord your God hands the town over to you, use your swords to kill every man in the town. But you may keep for yourselves all the women, children, livestock, and other plunder. You may enjoy the plunder from your enemies that the Lord your God has given you. Okay. So I guess it was just in certain contexts and situations that God wanted, pretty much everything gotten rid of. Now, I would assume... Well, you know what? Let me hold off on that, because I just read some of the first couple of words in verse 15, and that seems to expound a little bit and add some nuance to this. But I assume, it says as you approach a town to attack it, so they're already mentally prepared to fight in this context. So, yeah. In that case, if they're already geared up to fight, but then, the people are, then the people that they would fight agree to terms of peace, I wonder if they would have to outright state that, those people living in service to them, that the people being attacked, or the people being otherwise attacked, would have to live in service to God's people. I wonder if that would be within the terms, because if they don't specifically state that, I don't know. I would kind of wonder about the other people then suddenly not being so okay with it, if that was just sort of sprung on them without prior notice. But let's move on to verse 15 here and add some nuance to this before I get too much further into any thoughts of my own. So, verse 15. But these instructions only apply to distant towns, not to the towns of the nations in the land you will enter. In those towns that the Lord your God is giving you as a special possession, destroy every living thing. You must completely destroy the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, just as the Lord your God has commanded you. This will prevent the people of the land from teaching you to imitate their detestable customs in the worship of their gods, which would cause you to sin deeply against the Lord your God. So all the stuff with the terms of peace and whatnot, like, that wasn't going to apply for them entering and conquering the promised land. Because God wants to weed those people out within the promised land anyway. Because they do things that God doesn't like. So, yeah. Those people were just to be outright destroyed. I assume the footnote is going to say the Hebrew term refers to complete consecration of things or people to the Lord, either by destroying them or giving them as an offering. This translation generally just renders that as the word destroy. And verse 18 here kind of explains why those particular people groups in the promised land were to just be outright destroyed. Because they would try and lead God's people astray. Specifically towards the things that God doesn't like, that he wants to get rid of them for in the first place. So I'm kind of wondering what the situation would be where they would plan on attacking a town that is, distant. Maybe if they were previously attacked by a certain kingdom or group of people first, and they're, launching a counterattack. Or there's maybe just threats or whatever being laid against them. Those are a couple of situations I could think of. I'm sure there are more. But anywho, I think we'll move on to verse 19 then, and wrap up the chapter. When you are attacking a town and the war drags on, you must not cut down the trees with your axes. You may eat the fruit, but do not cut down the trees. Are the trees your enemies that you should attack them? You may only cut down trees that you know are not valuable for food. Use them to make the equipment you need to attack the enemy town until it falls. So, I guess, trees that would have been more like cedars or maybe firs, spruces, whatever. As it mentions, trees that don't produce fruit that's edible, they were okay to cut down and use to make weapons or shields or whatever. But fruit trees, they were not to cut down. I'm wondering a little bit what the reasoning for that is. I mean, it might be that God thinks that is unnecessarily harsh to whoever they're attacking. Or maybe it's just like, hey, this tree could produce fruit. That might be useful for us at some point if we have access to this tree. So let's not just completely get rid of it. Plus, then, it just messes with the normal, natural growth cycle, pattern, whatever you want to call it, of the trees in question. So, does it really help that much? Again, the best case scenario would be that you're denying food access really to everybody in the area. The good part of that would be denying it to your enemies. But generally that's a kind of an extreme tactic that you don't want to use, because it makes you look even more the villain. But anyway, so yeah, I think pretty much everything in that chapter was new, as in, you know, not previously stated in other books or chapters. But yeah, so I guess this is kind of the expectation of how they would engage in combat with other nations and towns. But anyway, I guess that's gonna wrap it up for Deuteronomy chapter 20. Okay, so a lot of stuff about war and how they were or were not supposed to engage in war. You know, they being the Israelites of the time. But anyway, that's it for now. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. Give me a follow on Rumble or any other social media pages that I have down in the description below if you're interested in keeping up with me on those. And leave comments down below the description there with any thoughts you have. So, I hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.